The gathering storm. The vast expanse of the Orion Quadrant vibrated with an underlying tension that even the most seasoned diplomatic corps couldn't ignore. Starship Commander Elena Rodriguez stood at the transparent hull of the interstellar diplomatic platform, her dark eyes scanning the holographic displays that flickered with increasingly dire reports. The Krelvax collective was advancing. What had begun as isolated border skirmishes had transformed into a systematic decimation of galactic territories. Dozens of advanced civilizations had already fallen, their planetary systems reduced to scorched, lifeless husks. Humanity, a relative newcomer to the intergalactic community, watched with growing unease. Another transmission from the Viridian cluster, announced Marcus Green, the platform's communications specialist. His fingers danced across the quantum interface, pulling up a grainy holographic message. The image showed a Quarian diplomatic envoy, her iridescent skin pale with terror. "They're coming," the Quarian ambassador repeated, her translator barely masking the tremor in her voice. "The Krelvax advance is unprecedented. Their biomechanical warforms consume everything in their path. We've lost contact with 3 outer colonies in the last solar cycle." Elena's jaw tightened. The diplomatic platform had become less a place of negotiation and more a desperate war room. Representatives from dozens of alien civilizations huddled in increasingly fraught conferences, their once proud diplomatic postures now replaced by raw survival instinct. The Krelvax were unlike any enemy the Galactic Confederation had ever encountered. They weren't simply a military force, they were a horrific blend of organic and mechanical technology, capable of converting conquered territories and populations into extensions of their own biomechanical infrastructure. Each world they touched became another node in their exponentially growing network. "Humanity's contribution to the defense strategy is minimal," commented Administrator Th Lara, a crystalline being from the Nexus Confederacy. Her multifaceted form refracted the holographic data, creating a prismatic display of destruction. "Your species has been part of the intergalactic community for less than 2 standard centuries. What could you possibly offer?" Marcus bristled, but Elena raised a hand, silencing any potential retort. She understood the subtle xenopolitical dynamics at play. Humanity was viewed as a young, somewhat erratic species, technologically promising but politically unpredictable. The latest intelligence suggested the Krelvax had already conquered 17 advanced civilizations. Their methodology was terrifyingly efficient, targeted electromagnetic disruption, followed by overwhelming biomechanical assault. Entire planetary defense systems were neutralized within hours, with populations either assimilated or eradicated. "We need a fundamentally different approach," Elena muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. The traditional defensive strategies, fortified positions, technological countermeasures, diplomatic negotiations, had all failed spectacularly against the Krelvax. A junior diplomatic aide approached, carrying a classified data packet. "Commander Rodriguez," he said, his voice hushed, "we've received some unusual tactical analysis from our research division. It's unconventional." Elena took the data crystal, her fingers tracing its quantum-encoded surface. Something in the aide's tone suggested this wasn't just another routine report. As the crystal interfaced with her personal device, a series of complex strategic simulations began to unfold. The room around her seemed to fade as she absorbed the data. Traditional military thinking relied on established principles, defensive perimeters, technological superiority, measured response. But the analysis suggested something radically different, an approach so counterintuitive it bordered on madness. What if, instead of defending, they attacked? What if, rather than trying to match the Krelvax technologically, they introduced an element they couldn't predict? Humanity's greatest strength had always been adaptability. Where other civilizations saw limitations, humans saw opportunities. Where others calculated risks, humans were willing to take leaps that defied conventional wisdom. The gathering storm was about to change. And humanity was preparing to write a new chapter in galactic history, whether the other species were ready or not. "Prepare a full briefing," Elena told Marcus, her voice steady and resolute. We're going to propose a strategy that will make the other delegations either laugh or listen. And right now, I'll take either response. Unconventional tactics. The Interstellar Strategic Command Center hummed with a tension that bordered on electric anticipation. Elena Rodriguez stood before a diverse assembly of galactic representatives, her presentation loaded and ready to challenge everything they thought they knew about warfare. Dr. Rajesh Kapoor, head of Humanity's Advanced Strategic Research Division, stepped forward. His holographic display began to shimmer with complex mathematical models and tactical simulations that defied conventional military logic. The Krelvax operate on a unified consciousness model, Kapoor explained, his voice calm and calculated. Their biomechanical network functions like a massive, distributed intelligence. Every unit is simultaneously a weapon, a communication node, and a data processor. Traditional warfare simply cannot work. The assembled alien delegates shifted uncomfortably. Administrator Th Lara's crystalline form refracted nervous light across the chamber. And your proposed solution, she demanded, her translators carrying a note of skepticism. Elena took over. Disruption, she said simply. Not technological. Psychological. The chamber fell silent. Kapoor's presentation revealed a radical concept. Instead of matching the Krelvax's technological superiority, humanity proposed to introduce fundamental chaos into their system. The strategy involved multiple layers of unconventional warfare that would target the very essence of the Krelvax's collective intelligence. We've identified a critical vulnerability, Marcus Green interjected, bringing up complex neural network diagrams. The Krelvax collective relies on predictive modeling. Their entire strategic approach depends on calculating probabilities with near-perfect accuracy. What happens when those calculations become unreliable? The proposal was audacious. Humanity would develop a multi-pronged approach designed to introduce unpredictability into the Krelvax's strategic calculations. This wasn't about winning battles, it was about making the very concept of battle unwinnable for the enemy. Admiral Konstantin Volkov, a veteran of multiple interstellar conflicts, stepped forward. His cybernetic eye gleamed with a mix of excitement and calculation. We'll need a team that can operate outside traditional military protocols, he said. Individuals who can think beyond established strategic frameworks. The first recruitment began. Not for soldiers, but for strategists, psychologists, mathematicians, and individuals with unconventional thinking patterns. Humanity was assembling a team designed to be deliberately unpredictable. The alien delegates were divided. Some saw madness in the approach. Others recognized a spark of potential that defied conventional understanding. You're suggesting we fight chaos with chaos, muttered a Nexus Confederacy strategist, his tentacles writhing with nervous energy. Elena nodded. Precisely. The Krelvax understand patterns. They predict. They calculate. We'll give them something impossible to calculate. The first test would be subtle. A series of seemingly random technological interventions designed to introduce error into the Krelvax's predictive models. Small disruptions that would grow into cascading uncertainties. Dr. Kapoor outlined the initial phase. Quantum-encoded transmission bursts that carried no meaningful data, just enough electromagnetic noise to create statistical anomalies. Drone deployments that followed illogical patterns. Strategic movements that defied traditional military reasoning. We're not trying to win through force, Elena explained. We're trying to break their ability to understand the conflict. The room remained divided, but a spark of hope had been kindled. For the first time since the Krelvax began their galactic conquest, there was a strategy that didn't simply react, it anticipated by being fundamentally unpredictable. As the meeting concluded, Elena caught Marcus's eye. They both knew this was more than a military strategy. This was a fundamental reimagining of conflict itself. They won't know what hit them, Marcus whispered. Elena's smile was sharp as a blade. That's exactly the point. Outside the command center, the first quantum-encoded transmission burst fired, a single, seemingly random pulse that would be the first note in a symphony of calculated chaos. The turning point. The first true test of humanity's unconventional strategy came at the Epsilon Nexus, a strategic star system that had become a critical battleground in the war against the Krelvax. What began as a seemingly impossible mission would become a moment that would reshape the entire understanding of interstellar conflict. Lieutenant Zara Okoro stood on the bridge of the experimental stealth vessel Phantasm, her fingers dancing across quantum interfaces that defied traditional communication protocols. Around her, a hand-picked team of specialists watched with a mixture of anticipation and barely contained excitement. Transmission patterns are locked, reported Dr. Emil Novak, the team's quantum communication specialist. His fingers moved with surgical precision, introducing carefully crafted quantum noise into the Krelvax's communication network. The mission was deceptively simple yet breathtakingly complex. Rather than a direct military engagement, they would wage a war of information disruption. The Phantasm wasn't a warship, it was a precision instrument of strategic chaos. Admiral Volkov's voice crackled through the communication link. "Remember," he warned, "we're not trying to destroy. We're trying to confuse." At the Epsilon Nexus, the Krelvax had established what they believed was an impenetrable defensive network. Biomechanical warforms covered entire planetary surfaces, their collective intelligence processing millions of tactical scenarios per second. They were certain of their superiority, certain of their prediction capabilities. They were about to be proven catastrophically wrong. Zara initiated the first phase of the disruption protocol. Quantum-encoded transmissions began to flood the Krelvax communication network. These weren't messages meant to be decoded, they were mathematical impossibilities, statistical anomalies designed to introduce fundamental uncertainty into the collective's predictive models. Targeting their neural network synchronization, Emil muttered, his eyes reflecting lines of impossible code. "We're introducing computational paradoxes." The effect was subtle at first. Krelvax warforms began to show microscopic hesitations. Deployment patterns became marginally less efficient. Strategic calculations started to develop tiny, almost imperceptible errors. But in a system designed on absolute precision, even the smallest uncertainty was catastrophic. "They're trying to recalibrate," Zara observed, watching the holographic displays that mapped the Krelvax's collective responses. "But they can't. Each attempt to correct introduces more uncertainty." It was psychological warfare taken to its most extreme technological conclusion. Humanity wasn't fighting the Krelvax, they were unraveling their fundamental method of understanding conflict. Across the Epsilon Nexus, something unprecedented began to happen. Krelvax warforms started to act with hesitation. Their perfectly synchronized movements became fractured. Strategic units that once moved with machine-like precision now showed signs of what could only be described as confusion. "We're breaking their collective consciousness," Emil said, a note of wonder in his voice. "Not through force. Through uncertainty." The alien allies watching the operation could scarcely believe what they were witnessing. Administrator Th Lara's crystalline form vibrated with a mixture of disbelief and emerging hope. "They're becoming unpredictable," she whispered. It wasn't a battle in any traditional sense. It was a surgical strike against the very concept of the Krelvax's strategic thinking. Each quantum transmission was a scalpel, carefully designed to introduce doubt into a system that had never conceived of doubt. As the hours passed, the impact became clear. The Krelvax had encountered an enemy they could not understand, could not predict, could not categorize. Zara allowed herself the smallest of smiles. "Humanity," she said quietly, "doesn't fight like anyone else." The Epsilon Nexus would become a legendary moment in galactic history, the point where everything changed. Not through overwhelming force, but through the most human of capabilities, the ability to think beyond established boundaries. The war was far from over. But for the first time, the Krelvax were no longer certain of victory. And uncertainty, in warfare, was the most powerful weapon of all. Technological revolution. The aftermath of the Epsilon Nexus intervention reverberated through the Galactic Strategic Command like a seismic wave. What had seemed like an impossible strategy was now being recognized as a potentially war-changing approach. In a nondescript research facility on the outer reaches of human-controlled space, a new phase of technological warfare was taking shape. Dr. Aria Rodriguez, no relation to Elena, but equally brilliant, stood before a holographic display of increasingly complex systems. Her team represented the bleeding edge of human innovation: engineers, quantum physicists, neuroscientists, and computational theorists who saw the universe not as a fixed reality, but as a problem waiting to be reimagined. The Krelvax adaptation cycle is our greatest challenge, she explained to a mixed team of human and alien researchers. They learn. They evolve. Our previous disruption technique will only work once. The research facility was a testament to human ingenuity. Where other civilizations saw technological development as a linear progression, humans approached it as an ecosystem of constant reinvention. Massive quantum computing arrays sat alongside biological neural network prototypes. Holographic interfaces merged with organic computational matrices. Major Hiroshi Tanaka, a veteran of the initial strategic team, reviewed the latest data streams. "We need something they can't anticipate," he muttered. "Something that changes faster than they can comprehend." The solution was as beautiful as it was terrifying. Instead of a single technological approach, they would create a living, breathing technological ecosystem. A system designed to evolve faster than the Krelvax could predict. Dr. Rodriguez unveiled their most radical concept yet: adaptive cognitive networks that could fundamentally restructure themselves in real time. Traditional computer systems followed predetermined pathways. These new networks would be more akin to living organisms, capable of spontaneous restructuring, learning, and mutation. "We're not building a weapon," she explained. "We're creating an intelligent system that can outthink a collective intelligence." The first prototype looked nothing like a traditional computer. It was a shimmering lattice of quantum-entangled processor nodes, each capable of instantaneous reconfiguration. Biological neural networks intertwined with quantum computational matrices, creating a hybrid system that defied traditional understanding of computation. Alien researchers watched in a mixture of horror and fascination. The Nexus Confederacy's lead scientist, Dr. Lyrax, approached the display. "This is madness," he said, his tentacle-like appendages tracing the holographic interface. "No system can be this unpredictable." Arya smiled. "That's precisely the point." Field tests began in carefully controlled environments. The adaptive network demonstrated capabilities that bordered on the miraculous. When presented with computational challenges, it didn't simply solve problems, it reinvented the very approach to problem solving. Military strategists recognized the potential immediately. This wasn't just a technological breakthrough, it was a fundamental reimagining of strategic computing. Each interaction would make the system more complex, more unpredictable, more capable of outmaneuvering the Krelvax's collective intelligence. Major Tanaka conducted the initial strategic simulations. The results were staggering. Traditional military AI would provide linear, predictable responses. This new system generated solutions that seemed to emerge from pure creativity. "It doesn't just predict," Tanaka reported. "It imagines." The implications were profound. The Krelvax relied on a collective intelligence that processed information with machine-like precision. Humanity was developing a system that could think like a living, breathing entity, capable of intuition, creativity, and spontaneous innovation. As the first full-scale prototype came online, something extraordinary happened. The system didn't just run calculations, it began to generate its own strategic scenarios. Possibilities that no traditional computational system would ever conceive. Dr. Rodriguez watched the initial results with a mixture of scientific excitement and existential wonder. "We're not just fighting a war," she whispered. We're redefining the nature of intelligence itself. The breaking point. The Krelvax homeworld loomed like a massive, pulsing biomechanical nightmare. Countless interconnected structures stretched across entire planetary surfaces, a living testament to the collective's technological supremacy. For generations, no civilization had come close to challenging their dominance. That was about to change. Commander Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Phantom Wing, a specially designed strike vessel that represented the culmination of humanity's most radical technological innovations. Around her, a team of specialists worked with a precision that bordered on telepathic coordination. Adaptive network is online, reported Dr. Emil Novak, his fingers dancing across quantum interfaces that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. We're approaching critical infiltration point. The mission was beyond audacious. They weren't planning a traditional attack. This was a surgical strike designed to introduce a fundamental disruption into the very core of the Krelvax collective consciousness. Major Hiroshi Tanaka monitored the adaptive cognitive network, the living technological system developed in the previous months. It wasn't just a computer system. It was a thinking, evolving entity that could reshape itself faster than the Krelvax could comprehend. Quantum entanglement sequence initiated, Tanaka announced. The ship's systems seemed to pulse with an almost organic rhythm. The Krelvax had always believed in their invincibility. Their collective intelligence had systematically conquered countless civilizations, converting entire planetary systems into extensions of their biomechanical network. They saw themselves as the ultimate form of technological evolution. They were about to learn the true meaning of human innovation. The first phase of the attack was subtle. Quantum-encoded transmission bursts began to penetrate the Krelvax's communication networks. But these weren't traditional signals. Each transmission was a complex mathematical paradox, designed to introduce fundamental uncertainties into their collective processing systems. "They're trying to recalibrate," Dr. Aria Rodriguez observed, watching the holographic displays that mapped the Krelvax's response. "But each attempt is creating more chaos." It was psychological warfare taken to its most extreme technological conclusion. Humanity had identified the critical vulnerability in the Krelvax's seemingly impenetrable collective intelligence, their absolute belief in predictability. The adaptive network began its most complex operation. It wasn't just disrupting communications. It was introducing a form of technological confusion that the Krelvax had never encountered. Each microsecond brought new, impossible-to-predict variations. Across the Krelvax homeworld, something unprecedented began to happen. Biomechanical structures that had functioned with perfect synchronization for millennia started to show microscopic hesitations. Strategic units became marginally less efficient. Computational matrices developed tiny, almost imperceptible errors. "We're breaking their collective consciousness," Emil whispered, a note of wonder in his voice. "Not through force. Through uncertainty." The breaking point was approaching. The Krelvax were encountering an enemy they could not understand, could not predict, could not categorize. Elena's voice was calm, almost gentle. "Humanity doesn't fight like anyone else," she said, watching the holographic displays that showed the progressive breakdown of the most advanced collective intelligence in known space. It wasn't a battle in any traditional sense. It was a surgical strike against the very concept of the Krelvax's strategic thinking. Each quantum transmission was a scalpel, carefully designed to introduce doubt into a system that had never conceived of doubt. As the hours passed, the impact became devastatingly clear. The Krelvax were experiencing something they had never known, true uncertainty. Their perfectly synchronized collective was fragmenting, their absolute certainty crumbling. "Infiltration complete," Tanaka reported. "They're losing cohesion." The Krelvax homeworld began to tremble. Not from physical destruction, but from a fundamental breakdown of their collective intelligence. Billions of interconnected units suddenly found themselves disconnected, uncertain, lost. Humanity had done the impossible. They had found a way to defeat an seemingly invincible enemy not through overwhelming force, but through the most human of capabilities, the ability to introduce uncertainty, to think beyond established boundaries. The war was far from over. But for the first time, the Krelvax were no longer certain of anything.